Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. Everyone in the hospital loved Abigail. Abigail Green, or as she was most often called by those close to Abby, worked as a nurse in the internal medicine department. For 2 years now, despite the fact that each shift of the girl was scheduled literally by the minute, and by the end of the working day, she, as a rule, fell down from fatigue. Abby could not imagine herself in any field other than medicine. The young nurse, who would have turned 23 this year, saw her true calling in helping people. Although work in a state hospital assumed its own difficulties, and somewhere even a very unsightly side, the girl was convinced that she was doing an extremely important and necessary thing for the whole society. As with any employee of the medical staff, Abby had a lot to worry about. All patients are different and need different types of care. "Mr. Peterson, here are your pills." The nurse was talking as she walked, putting a small plastic cup out from under her nose onto the pensioner's table, where there were as many as 4 pills, different shapes and sizes. "The doctor said you will need to drink them immediately after eating, but with an interval of 20 minutes, and 2 tablets at a time." Mr. Peterson grimaced and pursed his lips with displeasure, looking at the piglet's medicines prepared for him. "Isn't it possible to somehow arrange it so that you can drink less of these pills? Better yet, avoid them altogether." An elderly man who had been studying for the 2nd week in a row from an exacerbation of gastritis looked at the girl with hope, as if she were an angel capable of administering his difficult gastritis on gastrofate. "If you do not want your gastritis to smoothly turn into an ulcer, then, alas, nothing can be done," the nurse answered with a kind but stern smile. "You must definitely take a course of appropriate medications. Believe me, it will be better for you if, at the end of the course, you can taste your favorite power again." Mr. Peterson laughed wistfully with a chuckle. "Honey, so when will this paella be?" The pensioner licked his dry lips. "Probably thinking about the coveted dish. It's your boss, the doctor, that is, he made it clear to me. After treatment for another 6 months, it will be necessary to eat only water. The Holy Spirit. So after all, it won't take long to roam. From poor nutrition, it's all right. Mr. Anderson explained to you." Abby nodded to him. "At the end of the course, you will need to follow a special restorative diet for some time to exclude the possibility of a relapse. But the health of a light meal does not mean that you have to starve. If I'm not mistaken, you would have been assigned 1 table." "Well, yes, with sadness," the old man answered. "There are only steamed vegetables to soups, not even fried meat." "And why do you need meat?" Abigail was sincerely surprised. "I remember that you ended up here. You overcooked barbecue and even flooded it with decent alcohol. Just what I had to do then." The pensioner was indignant. "Just think, I got burned a bit. Don't throw him away because of such nonsense. Jack was marinated all day the day before, excellent with pork. This was supposed to be a real treasure, not a barbecue. And we old fools got carried away then with a game of chess players and slapped him. Thank God that you were brought here on time with a slight reproach," the nurse told him. "If it were not for your friend, you would have missed something much more valuable than some piece of meat. Mr. Peterson's health is much easier and faster to lose than to restore it piece by piece. In addition, with your diet, you can steam cutlets and marketable fish only from the mosque, both. First, so that the body calms down properly." Action, and continued her walk around the wards, having previously distributed to all Mr. Peterson's neighbors the medicines they needed. Leaving the room, the girl glanced at her wristwatch with a worried look. Although she was happy to chat with Mr. Peterson, there were many more patients waiting for her, and there was less and less time to travel. The nurse sharpened her step and entered Mrs. Nowalski's room. The young woman who was brought here to the hospital. The night before, Nadine had contracted a serious cold. It quickly escalated into pneumonia. For a week, the woman was treated at home on her own, but this did not help. So she needed immediate hospitalization. Abby needed to put the patient on a drip and, at the same time, measure the temperature. That night, the dangerous 39 degrees invariably held. The girl was seriously worried about the condition of this woman because that house left two small children who only had an old grandmother from their relatives. For her, as Abby understood from the doctor's conversation, Nadine herself was constantly courting. Unfortunately, things weren't going well this time either. The thermometer showed 38. The temperature subsided but quite a bit, giving the patient a lowering fat injection. The nurse placed a bag of medicine in the dropper, which was supposed to alleviate the patient's condition. Before that, she once again carefully checked the prescription to be 100% sure that she had chosen the right soda and medicines. At that moment, when the girl was checking whether the catheter securely fixed in the patient's Vienna, she unexpectedly opened her eyes and looked at the nurse. The nurse placed a bag of medicine in the dropper, which was supposed to alleviate the patient's condition. Before that, she once again carefully checked the prescription to be 100% sure that she had chosen the right soda and medicines. At that moment, when the girl was checking whether the catheter securely fixed in the patient's Vienna, she unexpectedly opened her eyes and looked at the nurse. The nurse placed a bag of medicine in the dropper, which was supposed to alleviate the patient's condition. Before that, she once again carefully checked the prescription to be 100%. She once again carefully checked the prescription to be 100%. At that moment, when the girl was checking whether the catheter securely fixed in the patient's Vienna, she unexpectedly opened her eyes and looked at the nurse. "Where?" she said weakly, heartily. "Where are my children? What's up with them?" Despite the fact that Nadine spoke very quietly, Abby understood that she was not a little disturbed. Worrying was for her now the most unfortunate day. "Do not worry, please," her nurse asked in a calm and peaceful voice. "Do you remember anything?" Mrs. Nowalski just shook her head and then just as quietly said, "I forgave SARS. That's what my local doctor told me. I was in treatment, but someone had to look after the house. Mom, she's really old for me. Hush, hush. You can't talk much now," Abby reassured her, hearing the woman lying in front of her in a hospital bed. Panic notes began to slip in her voice. "You were brought to us already unconscious with pneumonia, but we will help you, of course," the nurse promised her. Nadine turned his head with difficulty to look around. "The last thing I remember was standing in the kitchen making soup. Then the head suddenly swirled and, 'You have a very high temperature. You need to calm down. The medicine will work soon and you will feel better,' Abby assured her. And then she added, 'And what about your children and their grandmother?' 'Don't worry, there is someone to look after them.' Oh my God, Rustin Lotto. How did it make me so upset?" Abigail stayed with the patient for a while, until she finally fell asleep. Only then was she able to continue her rounds with a calm heart. While helping the last elderly patient with a broken leg at the time, she had to move into a wheelchair so that the nurse could take her to another room for tests. Abby thought involuntarily. She remembered a recent incident, switching with her right in the middle of a broad day on the street. A little over a week ago, the nurse, as usual, stood at the bus stop and waited for the bus stop and waited for the bus to get to work. The weather that day was slushy. Just before leaving the house, Abby caught a heavy downpour, and now the whole road literally shone from the puddles that had accumulated on it. Rainwater humbly reflected the cold rays, looked out from behind the clouds of the autumn sun. The air, though humid, was filled with the most pleasant aromas, among which the fresh smell of ozone dominated, the Pittsburgh breath of autumn leaves. Abby enjoyed a full run after him. Somewhere nearby, there was a piercing eardrum, screeching brake on the asphalt of tires, to which the loud rumble of a powerful engine is added. Only now the girl noticed how a motorcyclist was rushing in her direction at full speed. It seems that the rider simply could not cope with the control on such a wet road. That's where he got carried away. With difficulty holding the steering wheel, the man on the motorcycle approached Abigail faster and faster. She froze in place in surprise. Her feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. "Don't you hear or what?" One of them shouted to her a minute before the men, and with one quick and strong movement, managed to push the young nurse out of the racer's path, at the same time jumping with her to a more or less safe distance. They did it just in time. The next second, the motorcyclist drove into the bus stop with a deafening roar. The driver of the two wheels of the iron horse again miraculously managed to jump off his unit for tiny moments before it was printed into an iron pipe, broke it in half, and made the glass roof of the stop burst, ringing, dying, crumbling from it fragments moan. Abby, falling to the ground, barely had time to cover her head with her hands as screams filled with horror began to be heard all around her. God, what a horror! Somebody call an ambulance. Police. Here, it seems, the man crashed. An inner instinct pushed the nurse to get up and look in the direction of the terrible accident. A monstrous picture immediately opened up to the girl's gaze, capable of frightening any unprepared inhabitant, but not Abby herself. The racer lay on the ground, breathing heavily, his chest nervously heaving, then falling sharply, giving out all the signs of a lack of oxygen and pain shock. The man, apparently on adrenaline, managed to pull off his helmet and now convulsively held onto his throat from under his fingers. Blood flowed non-stop, and a decent bed had already gathered around the rider's head. Next steaming and subdued wife collision, his motorcycle lay. God, he's about to bleed. Maruzia thought in a panic and abruptly jumped to her feet, reeling from shock. It took her a while to keep her balance in her stomach. The girl was unpleasantly occupied by a heavy knot. We must hurry, she thought. They crawled to the wounded man practically on their knees. I can help. Break up, she shouted. Drives away passers-by onlookers, as if tired of the left flies. Victim needs airspace. Has anyone called an ambulance yet? Several people in the crowd nodded in confusion. Okay, Abigail nodded. I will now give the patient first aid, and please don't disturb me. The girl's face took on a serious and concentrated expression. So no one dared to object to her. Only one young woman could not resist and asked her, Are you a doctor? Almost, Abigail answered quickly, and she was already trying to free the rider's neck from interfering with her high collar of a leather sports jacket. I'm a nurse. There was a whisper of understanding among the people. Glancing at the guy's face, and it was exactly a young man who looked about 26, 28 years old. Abigail noted his unnatural poverty in her mind. He had already lost a lot of blood, and every minute of delay could be his last. The laceration on the guy's neck was formed, most likely from an unsuccessful landing. The racer jumped without looking and apparently fell exactly on the fragments. A small piece of glass, which had already become scarlet, was sticking out of the guy's neck. Lord, my God, Abby whispered soundlessly, and then deftly experienced the injured artery a few centimeters higher on the torn one. Stopping the flow of blood, the girl continued to gently but surely put pressure on the right place, until finally, the sirens of an ambulance were heard in the distance. Already later, when the wounded guy was carried away on a stretcher by doctors. One of the team doctors took her aside and quietly asked the nurse, Have you done something like this before? How did you guess clamp the artery? I just work in the hospital, explained Abby. As a nurse, I have seen a lot of things, especially when I had to be on duty in the emergency room. The doctor looked at her with approval and said slowly, It's clear. I am glad that you are here today and at this time. If not for your professional actions, this young scorcher would most likely be dead by now. And now he has every chance of recovery. Let's hope the surgeons do their job well. Abigail nodded. And on that they parted. She heard nothing more of the young riders, and I didn't even know if he could survive after that terrible accident and the subsequent operation. But still, I believed in the best. In the end, the nurse, for some reason, was sure that he did not deserve such a fate. So life certainly gave him a second chance. But how did the frost not decrease in our snotty department then? Sandra Bricks, the second nurse, who was to be on duty this time on the night shift, was curious. Sandra was a tall, slender blonde, but also a terribly feisty person. Liked to gossip at every opportunity. Better yet, start a quarrel with one of the patients. Sandra loved to put herself above the sick, and without any hesitation enjoyed all the advantages that this little power gave her. No, in our kingdom, everything is just as calm. That's what they do not sit at home. Tell me, and then we will be on duty at night near the bed. Follow. Breathe, not breathe. Abigail looked at her partner in bewilderment. Well, somehow there is no light at home, and we are with you. We are also working. We earn money for the family and others too. And the fact that they go for walks with children in the city. So what's wrong with that? Yes, I agree. Now is the time for everyone to wear masks. But that doesn't change life itself. It's true. Sandra looked at the girl in a strange way. Sometimes she thought it was Abigail Green. The most natural fool just does not understand such obvious things. I look at you, Abby, and sometimes I wonder, why are you always drawn to sacrifice yourself? To you from this that some separate percentage is counted, that you carry yourself with these criminals as if they are all your relatives through one. Our business is very simple. Give a pill in time, but sorry for the French enema. Sandra dressed in a dressing gown and cut her lush hair high. She could easily work as a model in some fashion magazine. For Abby, it remained a mystery why she went to nurse at all, if she hates her job and all sick people in general so much. What are you, all the same, cynical Sandra? Shook her head. Abigail replied softly, For me, they are not just patients. They are people. Living people, you know, and they are waiting for our help and support. Well, support them then. Cole is so compassionate. Sandra responded with slight contempt in her voice. I'll get by somehow, I'm sorry. It was not enough to spend your nerves on strangers. They are missing every time. How do you get into this Willis's room? Sandra began again to throw mud at one of the patients who, in her opinion, allowed himself to communicate with her much more than was allowed. Abby tried to block out her chatter. The girl thought about whether she managed to do everything before the end of her shift. She should have gone home by now. However, she decided to go around her one last time. So just in case, Abigail's partner was only right about one thing. This year, due to excessive Washington and wet autumn, the number of cases of severe course of various respiratory diseases has greatly increased, which unfortunately have increasingly become unpleasant complications in patients. However, Nurse Green has never been one of those who will reproach patients for anything or somehow humiliate their dignity. The girl performed all her duties with calm humility, and certainly tried to support among patients. No matter how trite it may sound, a healthy, optimistic spirit. She believed that a good mood and a positive emotional background can alleviate the course of any illness, and the attention to patients from the medical staff could significantly affect this very background. God, Abigail, you are just a fairy. Fairy, repeated Mrs. Smith, the same grandma with a broken leg, when the girl brought her a small cart to the ward, on which stood a tray of hot tea in the light summer and some chopped fruit on a separate small plate. All this Abigail got for her, one might say, by smuggling. She had long noticed that a woman was embarrassed to eat with everyone in the general ward, and the quality of prepared food in the state hospital, to be honest, sometimes left much to be desired. Therefore, the girl slowly gave the elderly woman her own dinner. They, along with other doctors and nurses, could ask the cook to cook them something different from the standard hospital meal. "Eat on health corrects," Abby whispered to her. Then, just as quietly, she left the room, pushing the cart in front of her. The rest of the patients, of course, were aware of this overreach by the pretty young nurse, but they didn't grumble much. Everyone understood. Otherwise, Mrs. Smith, with her modesty, the intellectual, would have starved himself for a long time. What can you do here? She was such a person. The most interesting thing is that none of Abby's wards looking at this, the smiling brown eyes of the beautiful woman, could not think that for some reason she could be deprived of happiness. And this, unfortunately, the girl was just that. A simple nurse has long learned to hide her heartache, skillfully turns off all other feelings, except for the necessary ones, when she comes to work. The thing was that a month and a half ago, Abigail broke up with her fiancé, Olsen. The guy left the girl because of his overly inflated ambitions. He suddenly decided for no reason that his fiancée should definitely leave her job as a nurse, and instead urgently enter digital design courses. Abby then did not even know what motives her lover was pursuing. However, the news about her future, of course, was taken with surprise. "Olsen, what are you talking about? What design? And also digital? All my life I have never picked up anything more difficult than a pencil. Yes, I like to draw, but only as a hobby, to relieve stress after a hard day at work." "Well, that's what I'm talking about, Abby. You will not hold anything heavier than a pencil in design. Only digital style is called. You will draw illustrations for advertising. This is big money. This is not a ship for you. Yes, with syringes for the whole day, and even messing around at night. Good prestigious profession. But I like my job," Abigail repeated stubbornly. "I see no shame in giving a patient an injection or helping him with anything." "And then? Where did you even come up with such thoughts? Do you have any idea how much these courses cost? It is necessary to take out a loan at high interest rates. And then what to live on?" The nurse shook her head. "No, I will not take any courses. Moreover, I already have a profession and an important job for me in society. Let them not pay 1 million for this, but my life suits me quite well. I'm not aware. You will always disappear in your idiotic hospital. You come all gone with alcohol and some absolutely disgusting smell. Not the sewer, not the sewer, not that. Olsen, what are you doing? What's wrong with you?" Abigail tried to take the groom's face in her hands and look into his eyes, but he only rudely pushed the girl away. "Enough for me. You look at yourself, it's unrealistic to even go out to a decent place with you. You dress like some kind of last nun, by golly. Other girls, as you can see, all well. Groomed on heels, buys different little things in the central department store. Everything is on the brand. You alone are hanging around my second hand like a beggar woman." Abigail's hands. They fell with themselves along the body like whips, as if they were suddenly praying with heavy lead. She did not expect to hear so many terrible words from her beloved. For a moment it seemed to the girl that a completely different stranger was standing in front of her. And her Olsen, the one she fell in love with 6 months ago, finally disappeared somewhere, leaving this nasty, caustic double in his place. "Did you already decide who I am? A beggar or a nun?" She said heavily, "If I don't spend as much money on rags as your other acquaintances, then this is solely because, unlike you, I think about our future. Do you remember that we bought you a new laptop for work a month ago? Do you really want this particular model with a powerful video camera? She really want this particular model with a powerful video camera. Said you'll be able to create graphics much better than before. And you also said that you could find a much better paying job. When we get married, what has changed since then? Really, if I then spent all the money on clothes and did not give part to you, you would be happier. And then don't forget, I still need to help my mother. God. That's the whole problem. He rolled his eyes and waved his hands. Olsen, do you always think about anyone but yourself? Wake up, Abby. There's every man for himself in this world. And I want to see next to me an independent, strong girl who wants and can, if desired, not only provide for herself and her family, but also cover me financially. If need be, Abigail gave a short laugh. She seems to understand what he's getting at. So you are now telling me that you dream, in fact, to be a gigolo, living off rich and money, spoiled women. Where does it come from in you, Olsen? You were never like that. The girl chose to delicately keep silent about the fact that, with all her ambitions, Olsen still lived in a small one-room apartment left to him by his own grandmother. Now he and Abigail lived here together. They thought that after the wedding, they would be able to take out a mortgage, and the husband's sold apartment would just go as a down payment to a new home in a good area. But now, apparently, much has changed. But the girl herself was by no means aware of this. Small, you think like that, Abby? The groom grimaced. I'm telling you something completely different. And what about Alphonse? We can live a completely different life. To be modern, rich, happy. Now I'll show you something. Olsen fidgeted, looking around as if looking for something. It turned out that he put his old laptop somewhere, and now he could not remember where exactly. Wait. What about the new computer? Abby asked in amazement. I saw him recently. Was it on your coffee table? The guy didn't answer, and having finally managed to remove the old laptop from under the cabinet, he quickly handed over the dust from it, and then conjured over him for a couple of minutes. He showed his fiancée some website on the internet. What is it? The girl asked. Who is this man? A bright, colorful page shone on the display of a portable computer, from which a strange-looking young man was broadcasting to the audience. Dressed from head to toe exclusively in branded clothes, with a trendy haircut and several obviously very expensive tattoos on their arms and neck. This shocking type literally flooded with a nightingale, telling his viewers about how incredibly their lives would change if they bought a place in his marathon. Business go. Just imagine bending your fingers while gracefully turning your face into the frame, your premium brand gold watch. Imagine that you will never have to work again. From the word at all represented. Type with undisguised greed looked at the screen, as if trying to settle in the soul of every visitor to his site. This is completely stupid from Abigail's point of view idea. Now imagine that for this, you need to do just one thing. One thing that will not affect your close husband, wife, children of the former boss. Or rather it will, but only in the most incredible, mind-blowingly unexpected way. Olsen! But this is some kind of wildness, Abby exclaimed, not looking up from the screen and looking at the groom. Don't you see? This clown is just a puppet, with the help of which someone fools ordinary people. The boy hissed back. You just listen carefully. If you don't understand anything, I'll explain to you later where this vile quality comes from in you. Put labels on people. This is what I hang. Abigail choked with indignation, while the type in the gold watch continued. Only today, and only at the numerous requests of my subscribers, and I already know more than 6 million of you, I'm starting a super unique to dream business marathon. But hurry up. Unfortunately, the manager is now whispering in my ear that the number of places in the new set is strictly limited. Accordingly, we will only be able to accept those who leave an application right now. Olsen, I've had enough. What did you want to tell me with this? Abigail lowered the lid of her laptop. And you still don't understand, he answered with the question. I registered both of us for this seminar. What? Only the girl could exhale. Yes. Cool, really. There were only 50 VIP seats, but I managed to draw up 2 lots for us, literally, at the last second. It dawned on Abigail. Where did the new laptop go? Don't tell me that's why you sold my present. Speaking technically, it was already my computer, right? Olsen looked at the girl with undisguised resentment. "I have every right to dispose of my property. Jeep is a great blogger and business startup. He has such strategies in his head spinning. He has already helped so many people out of poverty." Abigail couldn't listen to all this anymore, she understood. Her fiancé literally blew his money by buying a bright pacifier, instead of using a powerful computer to find a new high-paying job. Olsen was a talented programmer and graphic engineer. When they met, he made so many plans for their future together. Abby thought that she had finally met a person with whom she would not only be interested in spending her free time, but also with whom she had a genuine feeling. She fell in love with him almost immediately. As soon as he began to tell her about the complexities of system codes and the types of pixels. They dated for a while, and then when they realized that they could not spend a single minute without each other, Olsen himself invited Abigail to move in with him. The couple planned to get married in the spring, when it would be dry, and nature would finally bloom with fresh, delicate colors. Everything has changed. A month ago, when Olsen suddenly began to make frankly strange complaints about his fiancée, like that she was stuck in her Philistine way of thinking, she did not want to strive for more spiritual development, etc. At the same time, he threw all sorts of buzzwords like noosphere, life in the moment and response in oneself, which Abby did not understand at all, but which she considered dangerous even then. As if on some subconscious level I felt that this would not end well. They parted then with a grandiose scandal. Olsen yelled at the girl as she packed her things that she would never achieve anything in life, and he is the best thing that could ever happen to such a limited person as she was, and that he has long had in mind. There is another girl who is nothing like Abby and who fully shares all the dreams and aspirations of life, suddenly had an epiphany on the Olsen show. Well, I wish you happiness. Barely holding back tears, resentment, and humiliation. The nurse said, "I hope you were not too lazy to book a place for her on this damn marathon too." "And I won't need it," Olsen said arrogantly. "Cloth smells. You are your old terry bathrobe, under which you could see long-standing sweatpants for wearing almost to holes. Vicky herself is from a wealthy family, and her father is a businessman, by the way. He promised me a place in his company if I made him happy." "Go away," Abigail said coldly. "I'm afraid this task will become as impossible for you as creating that software for an advertising studio that you couldn't master in the 6 months that we were together. And yet you chose the path of Alphonse. Olsen, although he disguises his low interests under self-development invented by someone from the outside." Olsen grimaced in shame like an apple biscuit. Abigail understood. She managed to hurt him a little, proudly chin up. The girl left the apartment that suddenly became so hated and with a heavy heart went to her home. There, an equal, difficult test awaited her. After all, Abigail's mother, Mrs. Kate Green, was clearly against her daughter's decision to break off all relations with her fiancé. Oddly enough, Mrs. Green reacted to her return more or less calmly, her usual intemperance as if hidden under a crust of emotional coldness, which the woman decided this time to reward her daughter. She hardly asked anything, just dropped mine, crowned from the threshold. "What did you walk up?" Apparently I should not wait for my son-in-law in the next couple of years. Abigail understood this only the beginning. Surely the mother will come up with much more sophisticated reproaches against her in the near future. It couldn't be otherwise. "Please, Mom, don't start," asked her girl. "But I'm not even starting," minting every word the woman said. "It still won't make sense." Abigail preferred to go to her room as soon as possible so as not to hear her mother's further ramblings. A week after breaking up with Olsen, the girl felt how sharp smells suddenly began to annoy her. Abby remembered that morning began for her with the strongest nausea. She felt both a panic attack and pleasant excitement at the same time. Having taken a pregnancy test, the nurse was finally convinced of his suspicions. She was expecting a child from Olsen. Talk to mother. She was afraid of this, foreseeing what kind of reaction awaits her a sea of accusations, comparisons with the daughters of her friends who have all been married for a long time and who have 2 or 3 children. So Abby continued to work at the hospital, keeping her pregnancy a secret from everyone. The girl also preferred not to say anything to her ex-fiancé, especially since he fulfilled his cherished dream. Married the daughter of a wealthy businessman, and that was especially mean. He did this just 2 months after they broke up with Abigail. The nurse learned about this joyful event from social networks. Their Olsen did not hesitate to post their beautiful wedding photo. The programmer's new bride was incredibly beautiful. Abby even wondered what she could find in Olsen to allow him to win her hand and heart so easily. Scrolling through a few more shots of the newlyweds on their honeymoon at Dubai's finest resort hotel, Abby sadly closed the Facebook tab from friends of colleagues and, of course, immediately deleted it as soon as their relationship gave the first serious crack. The nurse stroked her belly and wondered if Olsen loved her at all. He let her go so easily and did not even take an interest in the further fate of the girl. What is she going to do next? He removed it from his heart as easily as he did it on his own page. Abigail didn't regret getting pregnant. She only worried about the baby who will be forced to grow up without a father. But on the other hand, the girl thought, I'd rather put him on his feet myself than let him communicate with such a fool as his father. Abigail immediately thought of her mother. She did not yet suspect about the changes that were coming in her daughter's life. However, we will round it up soon. The stomach itself will give out their secret with the baby. Then it will be simply pointless to deny. In the meantime, Mrs. Green continued to take out on Abigail anger associated with the unsatisfied desire of a woman to improve her daughter's personal life. Every evening in their house there was bound to be a scandal of the following kind. That's why you, Olsen, and left, that you did not want to share his value system with him. The mother reproached her daughter. You need to be more flexible, dear, modern. It is necessary, you understand, to cling more even with a grip to what is supposed to be for you and not to let go until the last hold on, until the last hold on, until the other one that is weaker falls off by itself. Mom, my God. What are you talking about? She covered her face with her hands. Abby, unable to hear all this merry go round over and over again. Olsen, of his own free will, allowed some swindler to powder his brains. He spent as much money on these courses as I can earn in a couple of months at best. And what was there to cling to his stupidity? He sold himself richer, after all. Wouldn't sell. If you didn't want it, Mrs. Green stubbornly continued to stand on her own. He was right that you were so fixated on this hospital of yours. You don't want to see anything further than your nose. So he sat in old children the rest of his miserable life. My son-in-law needs help with the housework. Grandchildren. When her mother said the last sentence, Abigail pursed her lips in shame. In any case, at least at the expense of her grandchildren, she definitely cannot worry. Mrs. Green herself, advocating for her daughter's speedy wedding, tactfully kept silent about the fact that her husband had abandoned her many years ago, leaving her alone with the harsh world around and her 6-month-old daughter in her arms. How many troubles and worries young Kate Green had to endure in order to grow a worthy person out of Abigail, nobody knew except for herself. And yet the woman was downright obsessed with the idea that her daughter was a cabbage, a color that was destined to die all alone, since she so foolishly missed her only chance for happiness. That's why Abigail was more and more immersed in the hospital bustle. She was even afraid to think about the fact that as soon as she stepped over the threshold of her native home, her mother would pounce on her with another batch of reproaches and talk about an unsuccessful marriage. The last thing the nurse wanted after a difficult work shift was to confront her mother, who shook the nerves not only of the pregnant Abigail, but also of herself, that in her position a seriously ill person was a very dangerous business. For the first time, signs of cancer appeared in Mrs. Green. A year and a half ago. She was undergoing the most routine scheduled examination. But the doctor who took the 50-year-old employee of the dry cleaner was working at that time, and the woman cautiously recommended that she get a CAT scan. "Is it really something serious?" Kate asked apprehensively. "I don't think so, but it's best to check." The doctor answered her evasively, a young specialist of about 35 years old in appearance. "You work with various kinds of reagents, don't you?" "Right." Kate Green felt her heart beat uncomfortably. "Yes, but I always clean my clothes in respirators." She nodded to him. "I thought I was dizzy just from the new chemistry. The owner brought painfully rare funds. But he says all the raw materials are Italian. Ecological cannot. Like from him such symptoms be." The doctor thought for a second and then nevertheless wrote out a referral for a tomography. "In any case, it will not get worse," he said with the confidence of an experienced diagnostician, when the tomography confirmed that Mrs. Green had a tumor. Mother Abigail at first was in complete abstraction. She just couldn't believe this was happening to her, and most importantly, I had no idea how to proceed with it. "Mommy, don't worry." Abby tried to calm her down. "Doctors say that the chances of recovery are very good. There is an optimistic forecast. I need to try chemotherapy. This is a real opportunity to defeat the disease." At the word chemotherapy, Kate Green shuddered. That again, the reagents. "Oh, dear." The woman laughed sadly with a short, not cheerful laugh. "They used to be around me, and apparently they brought me to this. And now I have to work with them again. Only this time, all this muck will be poured into me directly." Abigail's mother burst into tears and buried her face in her daughter's shoulder. "You have to fight on your own." Abigail stroked her back, and a heavy, sour lump in her throat burst with difficulty. More than anything, she was afraid of losing her mother. "Only if you believe in healing. It will certainly happen. The drugs will work." "Yes, I do not refuse." "He wipes away his tears," said the mother. "Understand, I'm just scared. It's scary that I'll never see you in your wedding dress. I don't understand that I won't live your children at all. Years are measured out to them because I want to live them. Any normal person surrounded by his family and loved ones. And you try to think only about the good." Abby smiled through her tears, and then everything will definitely work out for us. Kate Green was determined to fight to the very end. She steadfastly went through 3 courses of chemotherapy, but the treatment, to the great regret of the doctors and the horror of her daughter, did not give an effective result. The pain receded, but not for long, later returning with renewed vigor and taking away the last hope from the unfortunate woman. Abigail personally supervised all the IVs that her mother was given, and with tears in her eyes, bought a wig for Kate when she lost her latte hair due to treatment. "Look, is it coming to me?" The patient asked. Her daughter tried on artificial hair. Did Abby try to find a model that would match the tone of her hair, which her mother wore before her illness? Certainly. Almost like a real one. She honestly assured her mother, but at the same time she tried not to look into her eyes. Kate pretended not to notice and only chuckled. "You know what I always liked about you, Abby? That you absolutely can't lie," she said smoothly. She takes off her wig and ties it on a smooth scalp, the color of a scarf. "Even though I raised you well here." Abigail was glad her mother still had some sarcasm left. While he was, there was also a belief that a solution to her terrible problem could still be found. Unfortunately, the 3rd course of chemotherapy did not give positive results. The doctor's voice sounded to Kate Green like the whistle of an axe that descends like a sharp blade on her neck. It was a verdict. "However, we can offer you an alternative option, which as a rule gives a positive result in 90s of cases." "You said that about the previous treatment," Abby's mother said with clear irony. "Show you what my guilt looks like now?" Kate, without asking permission, the doctor rolled up the sleeves of his loose blouse. All the hands of a dry cleaner in the Luxionova-Seba area were bruised from injections and drips. "You thought you could surprise me with this?" Dr. Helen Weiss nodded to her. I'm telling you about the operation. If we remove the tumor before it reaches its critical stage, you have every chance to return to normal life. Or die, the patient added grimly. Don't be so pessimistic, the doctor said, writing down something in her medical record. The operation will be expensive, but I think money is of secondary importance here. I understand you. Thank you, said Mrs. Green, and slowly got up, intending to go home. Abigail was waiting outside. Call for them with the mother of a taxi. You think? The doctor did not lag behind the patient. Rest now for 3 or 4 months after the procedures. Collect money, and then you are welcome. We'll put you on the waiting list as soon as possible. Kate Green did not answer then. She simply left the office in silence. Later, when she and her daughter arrived home, the woman locked herself in her room and burst into tears without holding back her tears. Abby then sat at her door all evening, asking occasionally if she needed anything. But her mother always answered the same thing. Don't need it, thanks. Everything is fine with me. Since then, Abby has supported her mother as much as she could, including saving part of the money from her modest salary for her operation in order to be able to finally cure her mother. Abigail was ready to work 7 days a week. Sometimes I took 4 night shifts at a time, and sometimes literally lived at work for weeks. The situation only slightly changed with the advent of the nurse of the unborn baby. Now, she should take care of herself more and give her body a rest. And therefore the girl nevertheless began to take the weekend, steadfastly endure the constant criticism of her mother in her address. Alas, the topic of the wedding became for Mrs. Green a real fixed idea, and she was not embarrassed by either her daughter's tears or those she brought in her defense. Arguments. Kate seems to have gone crazy every day, literally terrorizing her daughter with these conversations. Here I will die, and there will be no one to look after you, a workaholic. Even the mother started up with a half-turn, but do you really have no one at work with whom you could have an affair with Abby? Recently, she said that a new cardiologist was transferred to you. They say, how much can you? Will you now consider any man as my potential spouse? Abby asked her with despair in his voice. And what else can I do if you don't have the mind to shut up a normal man? She answered reasonably, pouring chicken broth into her daughter's plate for growth. The clock is ticking, Abby. Don't forget it, a couple more years. That's right, and then you want. And it will be too late to give birth. You don't want to be a stray, do you? Abigail carefully doesn't see yet. The mother touched her stomach a little bit on the side. Don't worry, I still have time, she said thoughtfully. Mother noisily poked the mitten on the edge of the ceramic plate. But I'm not sure that I still have a lot of this very time left. The pregnant nurse carefully got up from the stool and took a bowl of soup, briefly answered, I, perhaps at home, give. I don't want to spoil your mood. She left, and Kate shook her head in annoyance. Yes, much worse fool I baked about your happiness. Because of such tantrums, more and more often arranged by the mother against the backdrop of the absence of suitors from Abby. The young nurse began to catch herself thinking that she no longer wanted to return home at the end of her shift. The girl was physically tired of her mother's reproaches. Moreover, with her concerts, she harmed herself first of all, and only then Abigail and her baby. And what was most difficult, there was no way to explain this to her, because Mrs. Green did not want to hear anything. Abby worked a particularly hard night shift that day. Nadine, with great difficulty, went on the mend. For this, Abby had to sit next to her almost all night. The tired girl went out into the fresh air from the central doors of the hospital. She sighed as deeply as possible, at the same time, wondering where to spend another couple of hours before returning home. I really didn't want to plunge into the pool of hopelessness again, as Abby's mother called her actions to herself. Suddenly, a huge bouquet of soft pink loaves appeared in front of her face, completely behind a depressing autumn landscape. Oh, the nurse exclaimed with delight. How handsome. This is for you. A pleasant male face appeared from behind the flowers, which Abigail had definitely seen somewhere before. True. How unexpected but pleasant. Thank you. Abigail took it in her hands, holding out the bouquet to her and inhaling the sweet honey smell with pleasure. I'm glad you like it. Shake thick hair, said the man, but you don't recognize me at all. Abigail took a closer look at his face. When it finally hit her, God, it's you, that motorcyclist at the bus stop. Like you look much better than when we last met. That's for sure. A spark of sadness flickered in the greenish, dull eyes. I wanted to thank you for saving my life. If not for you, no need. I did what anyone in my position would. I know on the basis of anatomy and emergency care for large blood losses, the girl added at the end. The guy smiled good-naturedly and shrugged his broad, athletic-looking shoulders. Thanks anyway. Not every girl would rush to help a stranger herself, almost becoming his victim. I then completely lost control, unsuccessfully calculated the turns. What can you say? Wet road plus a driver who is in a hurry. Failure in 99 of cases out of 100. When the guy was talking about percentages in Abigail's head, something suddenly clicked sharply in her head. A brilliant plan instantly matured. Sorry, you didn't introduce yourself. The girl suddenly interrupted him. May I know your name? The guy was embarrassed, but answered with a smile. Sam Nowicki, at your service. May I know your name? He asked with a slight smirk. Abigail Green. Well, you can just hurry, Abby, the girl replied. Listen, Sam. Do not take it for impudence, but I have one unusual request for you. All I can. He spread his hands. Abigail blushed, but she had no choice. Either now or never. The girl knew that you were local Rockefellers, wealthy businessmen who could afford to buy the whole city, not like helping a pregnant girl with her little scam. Invite me tonight on a date, blurted out Abigail. Do not think anything. It's not because I don't have anyone to go with. It's just my mom. She's not feeling very well. She really wants to see me go to meet some presentable man, you know? She has such an idea fix. You come to my house today, also with a bouquet, and take me, as it were, to a restaurant. Of course, we cannot go anywhere, but just pretend that you are one of my beaux, trying to get attention in any way. Mom will be very pleased, and her heart will calm down. Do you agree? Sam grinned like a Cheshire cat, and Abby noted to herself that this was probably one of his most charming smiles, designed to impress all women at once on the spot. Running a hand through his hair, the guy immediately assumed a working pose. Seductively, apparently, he was flattered by the young nurse's offer. He began in a languid tone. Well, actually, I already promised someone a date. But it is not yet a fact that she will still come from her ski resort. Okay, Abby, I'll try to come over to your house tonight. I promise your mom will be delighted with me. Great. The girl thanked him and quickly wrote him her address on a piece of paper torn from a pocket notebook, hastily saying goodbye to a rich heir. Abigail rushed home feeling literally elated. Today she will prove to her mother that she can also be desirable for men of a completely different level than her traitor bridegroom Olsen. Let it be just for one day, or rather, an evening, but she will be able to feel loved and show her mother that there is no need to worry about the fate of her unlucky daughter. We're having fun, Abby exclaimed, runs into the apartment and carrying a huge bouquet of roses in front of her. And today I was invited on a date. In the evening we go with Sam to a restaurant. My God, what a beautiful bouquet. Mother sincerely admired. Probably dear. It's immediately clear that Sam is your serious intentions. Why were you silent for so long? Did Mother torment? Would I have known that you have such a luxurious admirer? And I wouldn't say too much to you. Mom. Wait hungry. I will not let you go to any restaurant. Why? The daughter was indignant. However, Mrs. Green preemptively raised her hand, which had given after chemotherapy. I know what I'm talking about. Believe me, they are chefs. That is, they serve such small portions in these restaurants that it is simply impossible to eat them. And you have to pay exorbitant prices for this luxury. Why do you need to spend money when you can have a normal dinner at home and then drink a glass of wine in a restaurant? As a result, Abigail did not argue with her mother's desire and went to prepare for a meeting with a fan. The girl put on the most beautiful evening dress she had, thank God. His hem was very successfully formed, something like a dome around the waist, which means that no one will guess anything. Mrs. Green was preparing the dinner party and Abigail was on pins and needles. In the depths of her soul, she, herself, already regretted that she had made such a mess. A fleeting weakness risked turning into her greatest shame, and the girl only prayed that Sam would come and take her at least to the park. What kind of restaurants are there? Mobile weekly squeak at the bottom of the bag. Only a few minutes remained before Sam's arrival, when Abby saw a short text message on the phone screen. Sorry, Abby, but my kitty came down, so everything is canceled. KO. No. Well, how is it? The nurse screamed in her heart to herself. On the other hand, what did she expect from the frivolous rake of the son of a businessman? Water. Politely, but with a dull whistle in every word. The mountain cavalier said, I just take pills, and I don't bother you anymore. Are you kidding me? Angered Abby hissed in his face. First you send stupid text messages to me, and then you come after me in this form. Do I look so like that you couldn't bring yourself to at least dress decently? Abigail knew she was being unreasonable and emotional, but she couldn't help herself. Am I not worthy of Sam himself coming for me with a bouquet of flowers and fulfilling my only request? The boy's face was filled with undisguised amazement. Yes. What did you throw at me? I see you for the first time in my life. What date? What other flowers? It was only now that Abby noticed that rich people looked strange. Something was clearly missing from his appearance. That's just what. Looking a little closer, the girl realized with amazement that there was no characteristic scar on the guy's neck. Which one did Sam have after the damage to the front? Turns out it was a completely different person. But how is this possible? After all, there is no such portrait resemblance between strangers. Abby, it's your Sam who came. The mother suddenly sang behind the girl's back. Why are you keeping a guest at the door? This is indecent. Come quickly. Now we will have dinner. Abigail quickly grabbed the fake Sammy by the arm and led him into the house. At the same time, the girl looked expressively into his eyes, saying, Please play along with me. But where is our fiancé? Dressy Kate froze on the threshold of the kitchen, barely seeing who her daughter had brought. Daughter, I don't understand something. Did you already say you're coming for you? Sam Noitsky, decent young man. And what's that? This is Sam, the nurse said, looking eloquently into the eyes of the beggar. You are a mother, don't worry. Don't worry, just Sam prefers such an unusual style of clothing. Yes, God's goodness. Suddenly smiling with a dazzling smile. Mrs. Green answered the tramp. Now all the main persons of France wear this. They want to be closer to the people. Street style. Abigail's mother looked at the groom with undisguised contempt. Well, yes, you are already spending your evenings well, daughter. Look what elite suitors used to visit us. Struck to the core, the stranger only pressed harder on the hand of a girl completely alien to him. He realized that his mother obviously somehow put pressure on her and wanted her to feel his support more strongly. After sitting at supper for a quarter of an hour, and having paid a few more scathing compliments to Sam, Mrs. Green retired proudly to her room. Not the sort of cavalier she expected to see next to Abigail. So I'll probably die knowing that my daughter got involved with a homeless person, the woman thought to herself with sadness and despair. But nothing betrayed her true mood. Now, will you finally tell me what's going on here? The beggar asked Abby when they were alone in the kitchen. The girl silently gave the guy a pill, an antipyretic, and a glass of water. Drink, it will help better than your medicine. When he took a couple of sips of water and washed down a pill, the girl briefly outlined the essence of the situation to him. Are you sure you don't have any more relatives? Abigail asked carefully, for example, a twin brother. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. No, exactly. I'm sure not. In any case, my mother never told me anything like that. She died a few years ago, and her stepfather drank himself completely. Already half a year, as we always lived in poverty. But because of his damn drinking and our old house burned down, he then fell asleep with a cigarette in his hand, and the beggar, whose name was actually Max, was silent for a while until he was folded in half by a fit of violent coughing. Okay, stay KU at my place for the night, Abby told him. Mom is still mad at me now, so it certainly won't matter to her if you want us to. I can see that you are sick. The season is cold all the same, only I'll style you in another room on the couch. Oh, okay, thank you. Max smiled. The sofa is the best thing I can dream of. For 3 days, as on the street at night. Abigail patted him on the shoulder as well. And then she said, we'll call your doppelganger tomorrow morning and find out. Maybe your riddle has a perfectly logical explanation. The girl put the guy to bed, but she herself could not close her eyes all night. She really liked Max. He was calm, reasonable, and did not have that rich man's hollow ambition that Sam had. Nevertheless, the nurse was once again convinced of how different outwardly similar people can be, only grown up in a completely opposite social environment. The next day, Abigail was able to get through to Sam and call him to a meeting. Seeing Max rich, the race car driver was a little stunned. An honest mother. How is this possible? He said, looking in surprise alternately at Max, then at Abby. So I would be interested to know the twin, looking at Sam with suspicion, Max told him. Let's go to your father. We'll find out everything there, and you, Abby, are with us. Come on, you found us both. Seeing, driving up to his son's house, Mr. Nowitzki went out on the porch to meet his heir. He had just returned from a difficult negotiation and wanted to break the news to Sam about a successful deal. However, when he saw 2 identical sons get out of the car, in the first second he almost fell to his knees. Then he ran as fast as he could at his age to Max and hugged him tightly, immediately recognizing him as his second brother. Son Max. Lord, what is happiness! Forgive me, for God's sake. I am so guilty before you. So guilty Max, of course, was taken aback. But Sam, without thinking twice, introduced Abby to his father and invited the whole company to go to the house, where they had a serious conversation. I then only just started to cook in a serious business. The businessman began. In Irene. My twins got pregnant, and only her heart could not stand it. She died right during childbirth. Well, you know how shocked I was. 2 children in my arms. And then, as luck would have it, competitors began to sit on the tail. The police were set on the tail. The police were set on me. In general, I had only one way out, to run to another state. Why did I stay here then? Maxim asked incredulously. The millionaire sighed bitterly. Oh, son, this is entirely my fault. Were you weak as a child? When did this whole mess start? He also came down with a cold. Were you 2 years old then? Well, so does Sam. I married, left some money for your nanny, and asked to look after you, to cure you. You know, you just couldn't take it. Moving with such a temperature lay. It was terrible to watch. So Sam and I rushed across the state line, while there was at least some kind of clearance. I thought I'd be back for you in a couple of months. Changed her last name on this story. Millionaire ended Sam and Max, although they were in the deepest amazement, but hugged and accepted each other. The father hugged them both, covered them with him. Max was able to return to normal life, once again finding a family. The guy showed excellent success in terms of mathematical calculations, So his father, without hesitation, took him into the family business, making him his partner along with Sam. Both brothers and Sam and Max began to actively court Abigail, but she ultimately chose Max. This simple but reliable man was much closer to her than the stiff one. Although with a good heart, Kate, Abigail's mom, had surgery out of turn. Mr. Nowitzki himself insisted on this. He really wanted the woman to recover as quickly as possible, but, among other things, he was also very impressed by her downright fiery character. Mother Abigail herself having learned the whole story. Mr. Nowitzki and his sons was very surprised at first, and then wept for a long time, only partly now. When she finally recovered, he and his father, a family of businessmen, modestly signed at the local registry office. So, out of the blue, Mrs. Kate Green became Mrs. Kate Nowitzki and found her own female happiness. Abigail soon married Max, and as soon as she gave birth to a baby in due time, you immediately adopted him. It was a boy, and they gave little Alex their last name. By the way, the brothers played 2 luxurious weddings on the same day. Sam still married his alpine cat, whose name was Johanna. Now both families are infinitely happy. They are raising children, and Sam is also planning to replenish. Abigail, a couple of months after Alex's birth, is pregnant with Max's baby, and they finally live the life that everyone once could not even imagine.